Welcome to the Irish Snug Podcast.
All that I have are these hard-working hands. No gold, no silver, no throne, nor love have I touched with these tired, calloused hands that have only held chisel and stone. Eyes damaged and poor from the dust of the granite, head down for my outlook is bleak. Each breath is a struggle as my lungs fill with rubble. I stare, for it cuts when I speak. My back it begs me for a moment's mercy as the peregrines circle above. Oh, to rise up like them, to be free from this hell, to spit out this pain and taste love. Had I been born as the son of a farmer, tending to cattle and sheep, to roll up my sleeves for the tall golden barley, a chance to sow and to reap, restful like driftwood washed up on the shore, or a dandelion seed on the breeze. Oh, let me be light that weaves between branches as the blackbird's song wakens the trees. For the heart is a slave where the slabs cut by blade and my prison walls heighten each day. In this cold quarried pit, every chisel I hit, I feel my life chipping away. But a man finds his worth, pulling rock from the dirt. I'm a king with no use for a crown. I'll graft harder each day for honour, not pay, till I lay my worn chisel down. Shaping each block that departs from the dock to build landmarks that I'll never see. With these God-gifted hands to beautify lands, I'll carve out my own legacy. For pride can't be mined, it runs too deep inside. I was blessed with tradition from birth. I know what I am. I'm a proud quarryman whose mark shall be etched on this earth.
So welcome back to the Irish Snug, everyone. Today's guest is a man who perfectly captures the dual nature of the Irish spirit. He's a man of action and a man of words. For years, he's walked the thin red line as a full-time firefighter in the heart of Dublin City, but he's also a craftsman who's spent time on building sites from Boston to San Francisco. Beyond the sirens and the sawdust, he is a poet whose work is now being taught in the very halls of O'Connell School, where he grew up. We're going to be talking about the rhythm of the fire service, the soul of a hurley maker, and the poet himself. Coming to us from the shadows of the Wicklow Mountains, welcome, Gerard Devine. Welcome to the Snug, Gerard.
Tim, it's great to be here. I'm
How
loving
you
what you're
keeping? Good?
doing. I've listened to every episode, and it's really it's fantastic to be here. I'm honored to be a part of it, to be quite honest.
We're both firemen, so I've been really excited to actually have this conversation. It's always great to talk with somebody on that. You know, we have the same language, the same, even though we're in different countries, we still talk the same language. I always say that as a fireman, we could travel anywhere in the world because there's a fire department somewhere in every corner of the world, and it doesn't matter if you don't speak the language, you speak the same language. You know what I mean? And you're welcome in any firehouse, and I love that. And it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere I've gone, if I come across, I don't necessarily hunt out a firehouse, but like I was in San Fran, for example, there, first time in America in a long time, and walking by a firehouse, and lads were standing outside. I just went over to say hello. Like nothing with me to give them. I wasn't looking for anything, but just a quick chat, like, and how are you getting on? And
Let's talk about growing up before you even set off to America for a little while. What was it like growing up where you grew up?
yeah, I was lucky. All my family would be Dublin. My parents, all my grandparents, except I had one grandfather. He was from Derry, but he came down to Dublin when he was quite young, I think about 14 or 15, and he remained in Dublin. Both my parents were all from town, from the city, north inner city. I had three brothers, one older brother, Patrick. Then there's me. Then there's John, Kevin, and the youngest is our sister, Helen. Great childhood. I usual brothers playing, fighting, sharing a room, 4 of us in the room, all the bros. Helen got her own room, of course. Dad worked in Guinness's. Dad worked in Guinness's from the age of 14. And back
Wow.
then, my dad is 90 now. I was actually with him yesterday, and he's still as sharp as ever. And he has remarkable stories about Guinness's. I know there was a show there about Guinness's, and it gives kind of the layout, but he has the dressing room stories, if you like, the characters, that you can't, that they, it's like a firehouse. There's just guys you work with throughout a career.
Has he shared any stories about any of these particular characters with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's some about everything from fights to, there was some remarkable, some quite sad ones as well, because I guess when you're 90 years of age and you're still knocking around, you're probably the last of the Mohicans. But I've heard I know you're big into your music, and I heard you talking about the Wolf Tones before. But when Tommy Byrne was a young man, he was in the brewery, as they called it. He was in Guinness's, and my dad was quite good pals with him. We'd keep an eye out for him. And Tommy said, "Look, I'm leaving Guinness's," and Guinness's was a great job to have. Dad said you were employed from the time you were like 14 to 18. Then you were kind of temporary. And then after that, because if they wanted to get rid of you, they could. But after that, the age 18, you got your full-time contract. So Tommy was into his music, and he said, "Look, I'm leaving Guinness's. I'm in a band, an unknown band at the time. And I'm leaving. I'm going to try and make it in the music business." And my dad tried to talk him out of it. He said, "Look, you're being crazy. This is a great job, And he said, "I got to follow my dream." So Dad said, "Well, okay, so." And my dad organised a whip around, and everyone, threw money into a hat for him. And my dad gave Tommy the money, wished him his best, and that was the end. And Tommy never looked back. Dad's never seen him since. I've seen the Wolf Tones a couple of times, and my dad always says, "If you see Tommy Byrne, tell him you're Patsy Devine's son, you're Patrick Devine's son." And I never did, I never really got the opportunity. But come here, there's so many stories, and but like, for example, the other day we went for a drive. Dad gets quite breathless when he walks, and it's hard because he was such a big, strong guy, and now it's just age catching up, I guess. But I have a nice, it's old, a pickup truck. So when you're going for a drive, you have a nice view. You can see over low walls, etc. So we go up to Hote, and we're up there at the summit, and we're looking out over Dublin Bay, and the Bailey Lighthouse is there at the mouth of Hote's there at the mouth of the bay. And Dad said, "Oh, there's the Bailey." He said, "We used to have to ring that every day in Guinness's." "Oh, why would you ring that, Dad?" And he goes, "Well, to get the tides, because everything happened up the Liffey. The boats went up the Liffey. Guinness's had boats. They'd also barges, and nothing could happen if the tide was out." So it's just so strange now that you can check the tides on your phone. But back then it was a different world, different time. And only the presidents, if you like, got onto the staff, the committee, they got promoted. And there was I don't know if you know the Late Late Show here. It's the longest running talk show.
To be honest, I've actually been on it.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Well, that was, not to go off on a tangent here, but
yeah.
John Daly from the Dublin Fire Brigade, right after 9/11, he calls me up and he says, "Timmy, listen, they want to do the Late Late Show wants to give you a phone call and have you on the show just to talk." To be honest, it was so fresh right after 9/11, and I don't even remember what the questions were.
Yeah,
but
of course.
But they called me, and and we were, they were asking me questions about what it was like and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the interview, he says, "Listen, we have a surprise for you. We have a guest in the audience here that knows you." And I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, this Tara, she works for RTE, and she's in the audience." Tara, I went to grammar school with her, and she lives in Dublin now. Well, she lives outside of Dublin. They put her on the speaker. Now I'm talking to her. I'm asking her because her dad was a retired battalion chief, FDNY,
Right, okay.
and her
Yeah.
brother is a retired. I don't know if he was a battalion chief. I think he retired as a captain.
Okay.
But I know the whole family my whole life.
Small world stuff. Yeah. Amazing.
It is, right?
Amazing.
So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there.
No, come here. I do that too. That's fine. It's called the Irish Snug after all, isn't it? So conversations will go in every direction.
Right. Yeah.
A guy called Gabriel Byrne, he actually lived out in Hout. He was the host for a long time, and Dad was saying that his brother was the first Catholic to get promoted in Guinnesses. Back then, you could come from, if you were in the British Army, you get a job straight in Guinnesses, so. Just stuff like that people mightn't be aware of. And, you talk about like visitors, he remembers Andre the Giant visiting Guinness's, and the poor guy could barely move. He was crippled. And Jesse Owens, he said he's a couple of regrets. And one regret is that he was passing by Jesse Owens and he never shook his hand, because Jesse Owens would have been a hero of my dad. And he didn't want to hassle the guy, but he kind of regretted not shaking his hand and telling him, what he thought of him.
What's the O'Connell School? Yeah,
so O'Connell School would be, it's in town and just in the northern of the city. And we would have been sent there. Like, I'm from Clontarf, and Clontarf, I suppose Clontarf is famous for the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, when Brian Boru kicked the crap out of the Vikings. Like, the Vikings were like, "Oh, we're here to rape and pillage," and they were, "Jog on. This is our turf." So Brian Boru defeated the Vikings, and while he was saying a prayer in his tent, thanking God for the victory, the guy came in, Citric, and chopped his head off and killed him. But so that's what Clontarf is famous for. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to grow up in. I'm right beside the sea, and parks, and great childhood, and walking distance from town, pretty much. But all my family had gone to school in O'Connell's, and the local school to us in Clontarf didn't play hurling or football, and we would be a big GAA family. So we were sent to O'Connell's, and great school. But I remember my very first day, a teacher came in and he's wearing like a cloak, and he took out this book and he read out all these names, it was like, Timmy Grant, John Daly, Tom McLaughlin, and no one's putting their hand up. He's just going on, and no one is saying, like, I thought it was like a roll call, but no one is like, "Yeah, I'm here." Everyone's just silence. And he goes on, and it must have been about 20 minutes. And he says, "Does anyone know who those young men were? Boys like yourself, young men, who they are?" And no one had a clue yet. "They're students of this school who took part in the 1916 Rising. No other school in the country had such a part in the 1916 Rising other than O'Connell's School." And that was my introduction. I was like, whoa, this is like living history. And like, it was very, very famous. Like, Luke Kelly, the singer, would have gone to O'Connell's. James Joyce went there, but I think he only lasted 3 days. I don't think it was any place for a skinny Jesuit, who didn't play hurling. Thomas Kinsella. There's a lot of kind of famous people went there, but that was my school, and I would have struggled in school insofar as I had dyslexia. We 6 first year classes, about 30 odd in each class, and I was in the top class. I was smart, but I struggled with dyslexia. So the likes of English, especially once we came on to Shakespeare, I'd no interest in it for starters, but I struggled with it. It was like a foreign language, but I stuck at it, and I did honours English for my leaving cert out of stubbornness. But there was like French, for example, languages failed miserably and stuff. But there was a couple of teachers there. There's a teacher there in particular, Connor Flood. He would have taken a good interest in me. And I got away with murder, to be quite honest, because I was good at hurling and Gaelic football. So the Christian brothers, they were happy once we're winning. And like I remember being sent down to, I was a messer as well. I was no angel, but I remember a few of us sent down to the office, and I went in last. The first 3 guys came out with tears in their eyes. Okay. And I went in, and the Christian brother said to me, Brother Murray, he said, Ger, would you like a cup of tea? And I was like, I'm okay, brother. And he goes, look, we're playing St. Paul's on Friday. How are we fixed? Is Darren Benham still injured? Like, no, he'll be okay to play, brother. And he just talked about hurling to me. And then just as I was leaving, I said, can I go now, brother? And he goes, you can. He said, but do me a favour. Ease up on the messing. Ease up on the messing. And I said, I will, brother. Sorry about that. You know, you got treated differently. You know, if you were, you were giving back to the school, I guess. You were putting them on the map. They had a very proud tradition in Gaelic sports. But it's gas now. The same school I would have been in trouble with. Like this year, they're doing a piece on me in the yearbook, and they teach my poetry in that school now, which is unbelievable.
They're
really.
teaching your poetry in that school.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great.
I kept in touch with that teacher, Connor Flood. He's a real dub, you know, a good guy, and he retired last year, and I went along. But I had a poem called "The Hurley Maker," and it was to be in Croke Park on the Sunday, but on the Saturday, Dublin were playing Cork, and I had a ticket and spare ticket, and I said to Connor, do you want to come in? I have a lovely corporate kind of ticket. And he goes, oh, no, use it. I said, Connor, please, we'll go to waste. Come in. So the two of us went in there, and my poem was in the match programme. Like there's 80,000 people there, and there's my poem in the programme, The Hurley Maker by Gerard Devine. And I didn't know it was going to be in the programme. I knew it was going to be on the screen the following day. But Connor was so chuffed. He's showing people, I taught this kid, you know, that's him there. And they're going, yeah, some kid the size of him, you know. But it's great for things to come full circle, you know.
Right.
It's lovely. And you don't often get to thank people until it's too late, you know. You're standing over someone's grave, and you're telling them then how great it was, and it's nice. But if you can tell them while they're still living, and I'm a big believer in that, my dad would have taught that to us. If you think someone's great, tell them, you know.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. What was the decision to come to America? Was that all GAA, or was it work?
It was a bit of both. I got into college. I got into UCD doing sports management. I was on the Dublin under-21 Gaelic football team on the panel, and I got injured. I got a bad injury in training, and I tore ligaments. And I was trying to get back in time for championship. I didn't make it, but there was a physio there at the time, a guy, James O'Toole from Galway. He was heartbroken for me, and he said, look, I've friends in Boston. Gaelic football was played in Boston. He said, why don't you go over there for the summer? You can work, you'll get paid working, you get you a job on the building sites, and you just play Gaelic for them, and you'll get your accommodation will be sorted, and you'll get your flights paid for. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. So I went over, and like, it seems like I'm 50 now, so like over 30 years ago, it was a different world. I was told to wear my red Clontarf tracksuit top, and I'd fly into Logan Airport, and a guy called Keith from Dublin would meet me. So I'm there grand. So I fly into Logan Airport, and I was kind of the first of my friends to do this, you know, and it was a big deal. And my dad says, like, he said, he remember seeing me off at the airport. He said, I was just like a skinny kid going away. Like, it was just, you know, it was a big deal. He'd never been to the States. He never has been, or my parents, or anyone in the family. I'm standing in Logan Airport, my red top on me, a gear bag, and about 4 or 5 hurls by my side. And a guy comes up to me, he just goes, you must be Ger. I was there, yeah, you must be Keith. And he goes, I am. He says, geez, you're a big fucker. I suppose I am. He says, are you hungry? I says, yeah. He goes, come on, we get you something to eat, and we go back to my house first. We need to ring your mother and tell you got here safe. And that was it. And he brought me into South Boston, and I remember all the IRA graffiti everywhere. And I was like, man, this is unreal. And then straight into the Black Rose pub where Keith worked. And
Great
I
bar.
got like a hamburger, my first hamburger in America, and a pint of orange juice. I was only 19. I couldn't drink legally. Pint of orange juice, and I was in heaven. And so I played, I worked on the building sites there in Boston, and I played Gaelic football. I ended up going back for 3 summers. The work was crazy.
This is what, 30 years ago?
Yeah.
That's probably about the time they were building that tunnel underneath the city. Does that ring a bell?
That does. I remember, like, this is dreadful, but like back then we were working and playing and drinking. There was no, it kind of wasted on me a little bit. There was no sense of seeing the sights.
Right.
It was dreadful, and I think about it. Like I remember, so I hadn't been to Boston Harbor, and I was working beside it in the Black Rose and stuff. But you shouldn't really have been working anyway. We were illegal, so you're working on the sites. That's fine. And then I did the door on the Black Rose. I was 19 years of age, and I remember everyone shows ID, as you know, in the States. Everyone just shows the ID, and I'm standing there on the door, and these guys come up, big guys, and they're showing me their ID, and they're all cops. I'm like, oh, you know, and I'm like, you know, they show me, and I'm reading, and I'm like, my heart is thumping, like, because all they have to say is, "Where's your ID?" You know, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
But
how big are you, Jer?
I'm 6'3" and a quarter. My dad says never forget the quarter. You know.
Okay.
But like, I've brothers bigger than me. Pat is 6'5", John's 6'4". I'm 6'3", Kev is 6'2".
Wow.
So they're all big guys. Yeah, I loved it. And then I went you'd get flown down to New York on a Sunday. If we'd no match, you'd get flown to New York to play a game. So there was the teams down. I'm trying to remember the teams. I remember there was Stanford. Because I got flown over from Ireland for the weekend a couple of times to play a Gaelic match. And you get a couple of bob, like not much. You might get $100, $200, but what an experience. But so you'd be playing, you'd be flown down the domestic flight. And I remember we won a game. I'm trying to remember who I was playing for, but we won a game in New York that we weren't supposed to win. And there was actually 4 of us. 2 of us were from Dublin and 2 guys from the north, from Fermanagh. And we won this match again. We beat the best team, and we all played really well. And like, you're drinking literally in the showers. You're just giving a beer, get that into you, you know. But it was, the football was a different kind of standard of football, possibly not as skillful, but way more aggressive. I remember being in the changing room before a match. I was about 20 years of age, and these guys are all pumping each other. It was like, it kind of reminded me, nearly like ice hockey, this type of level of aggression they were building up, you know. And they said, we're going to beat these, blah, blah, blah. And they start headbutting the lockers. And I'm the only one not headbutting a locker. And I'm like, oh, geez, you can't beat them, join them. So honestly, I'm like, just going, this is bananas, you know. But that was in Gaelic Park and Van Cortlandt Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, great times. Great times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played rugby in both of those fields. A lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, like, I've probably been to New York like 13 times, and it was only the last time I was there with the Fire Brigade, actually, in 2006, with the Gaelic team. Still have. And that was my first time to see like the Empire State's Building or do anything touristy, like, because you're just playing football and then going to the pub, you know. Or
do you remember any of the pubs that were right around Gaelic Park there?
You know, I'm listening to your podcast, listening to the stories, and some of them sound familiar, but I can't be. I think I think
picture them,
Sullivan's.
Yeah.
Is there no Sullivan's?
A lot of them most of them are all gone now. But like Characters was like right up the block from there. I saw the Wolf Tones play there like twice.
Right.
They used to play there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still very Irish. You know, there's still some Irish in that area for sure.
Yeah.
They tore down that whole building at Gaelic Park where the bar and that little catering area was. They
Right.
tore
Yeah.
that down, sadly.
Yeah. It's a
It
bit-
was very old and falling apart, but it
yeah.
has so much history
Yeah.
there. You know what I mean? And but they're still having games there, but I know the GAA hasn't. I don't know what's going on with rebuilding that building, or if they're even going to do it again. I heard they were supposed to rebuild it, but
Yeah, because in general, the GA are very good at pumping money back into the sport, and that's why the sports have survived. They're thriving. In fact, like women's football now, women's Gaelic football is really come on, and camogie, which is basically the hurling, female version of the hurling, they've really come on in numbers over the last. But like the GA clubs over here, they're the hub of the community, and I know Des would have been chatting about this, and Dermot as well. Like, they really are, like, everything happens there. And
so you end up making your way over to San Francisco at some point.
yes, so I spent 3 summers in Boston, and then a good friend of mine, Pat Brennan, a Kilkenny guy, he said, come on out to San Fran, and we play hurling over there. So I loved that. Not that I didn't fall in love with Boston or New York, but I think I was just a little bit older. I was probably about 23. I was legally able to drink. It was a bit more streetwise, and I loved it. Just the beaches, and you could go like be in the water one day, and next minute 4-hour drive you're in snow. It was incredible.
Did you try
there?
Did you go skiing?
Yeah, I did the snowboarding. I loved snowboarding.
Oh, you did?
There's sometimes you could go up and you just end up in the casino for the weekend, drinking.
In all, what was the amount of time you were in the United States?
Yeah, San Fran, I ended up in San Fran for probably about 2 years, because I stayed over there. I had a girlfriend and stuff, and I'd gone over in drips and drabs. I actually came home when I got the interview, because I went over again when I was a bit older, and I'd done the interview for the Fire Brigade. I was about 27, and I did the test, and then I got the test, and my mom said, if you get this test, you have to go for the interview. I was like, yeah, okay. So in the meantime, I'd gone back to America, and next thing, there's a phone call to the pub, St. Stephen's Green. It was just the Irish pub I worked in as well. And you have an interview. I was there, when's the interview? And she goes, it's like on Thursday or something. I was like, so this is like Tuesday. So I had to get a flight. I arrived home the day before the interview, and I arrived home in the evening. There's no barbers open. I think I'm a hair kind of longish and dyed blonde and stuff. So one of my brothers just shaved my hair off. Another one of my brothers gave me a suit, and I went in and did the interview, and luckily I got it, but I was very ill prepared. But then it came. It was going to be 3 years before I got called back for the Fire Brigade to actually start. So I actually went back to America then for a good while, back and forth. But I loved America. I loved the Irish bars, and I know it might sound to someone that hasn't been, like, why would you leave Ireland and just go to an Irish bar? What's the experience? Because the best crack was the Irish bar. Like, there was a reason there'd be a Budweiser sign with a shamrock over it. It was to attract people in, because the crack in the Irish bars was just great. It was like a mini family, especially when you're away from home.
There's kind of, it doesn't really exist quite as much anymore, but years ago, there were 2 types of Irish bars in New York City. And it was the Irish American bar, and then there was an Irish bar that pretty much only the Irish were in there. And that's where all the games were all the time. And I did have friends that were from Ireland, so I'd go in with them. I actually, I don't know, when I was younger, you'd feel more comfortable if you were going into this place with somebody that was Irish,
Yeah.
And I don't mean Irish American, I mean Irish, But that existed. I don't know about anymore. Like Woodside in Queens, that there was certain bars that was like really, it was just Irish in there.
I remember playing a couple of games in New York, and you might arrive in the evening before, and I'd have to stay with be one of the players with their family, and that was Woodside and Yonkers and
That's Woodlawn.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It was a team
Woodside's
there.
in Queens, very Irish neighborhood. Woodlawn,
Woodlawn.
very Irish neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's actually in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And McLean Avenue is the borderline. So you go on the other side of McLean Avenue and you're in Yonkers.
Yeah.
You know, so you've been through that whole area. Rory Dolan's would be on the Yonkers side, and right across the street is Woodlawn, the Bronx.
Yeah. It's all very vague to me, but I know it sounds like, I remember just driving along in a cab or whatever, and just like, I couldn't get over the size of the buildings, the thickness of the steel beams, and it was all very very eye opening. Like, for coming from Dublin, where we got a couple of bits and pieces of high rise here, but nothing in comparison. You know, we were a small city back then. Relatively are still a small city, but you were seeing everything from the freeway, really. I was just going straight to Gaelic matches, and then you'd have your drinks afterwards, and then you were heading back to Boston.
How old were you when you went back to Dublin and got on the fire department?
Yeah, so I would have started when I was 30. I sat the exam when I was 27, and I got it. The fire brigade, it wasn't really on my register. And there was a couple of guys in the club, firemen, and they said, "Look, you should check this out." I was like, "Okay," and I did. And the more I looked into it, I went, "Man, why haven't I gone for this before?" So I started when I was 30, and John Daly would have been one of the guys who trained me. I always tell him that I'm a reflection of him. So much to his amusement.
I have a long history with that man.
Yeah,
we've known each other for a very long time. Huh?
I'm
going to get him on the show. I'm gonna. Yeah.
He's a good guy. No, he's been very good to me. Any advice I need, you know, you can. Obviously, every time I see John, we're both kind of laughing at each other and having the crack. But there's been a couple of times I've had to have, you know, one or two chats with him, and he's been very good, very helpful. You know, he's a good guy. You know, they always have my back. I appreciate
we
that.
first met him I first met him with it was a group of 5 or 6 of us that went over to Ireland, and I think it was 1995, and we went to the Rosa Tralee Festival, and we marched with the Dublin Fire Brigade pipe band in the Rosa Tralee parade, and that was the first time I met John. But we met him there. I remember meeting him, Peter Hederman. Great crack. And we did it, I think we did it a couple of years in a row.
Yeah.
You know, but since then we've always been close, you know, going over there, him coming here. So at what point did you start writing poetry? Was it before you were on the fire department or after?
I'm going to say after, but I had written a couple of poems when I was younger. Maybe as a kid. And then I remember my early 20s, like my friend's dad died. I wrote a poem for him. I'd never kept a copy. It was never a big deal. But then about 3 or 4 years ago, I ended up in hospital. I got bitten by a dog, of all things, outside of work, bitten on my hand. It was quite a bad bite, and it kind of tore into the ligaments, and I got badly infected. And I was in a hospital for a week. I ended up getting 2 operations, and I was a little bit low on myself. I was concerned. I'm sure you've been there. If you're injured and you go to move your arm, you can't move your arm. I was trying to move my fingers, and there was nothing happening. Absolutely nothing. So I was worried about my job, the house here. I was doing all the work at the house myself, and was worried about that. And someone in the job had sent me a poem you listen to, and I listened to it, and I was like, I can write like this. I have stuff in my head. I should be doing this. So in the hospital bed, I started writing my first poem. And I was bored stiff anyway. So then when I got out of the hospital, I couldn't work. I was out of work. So I was just sitting at home on my porch, and I just started writing. And I had all these years and years and years of thoughts and memories from from my own life, from travel, from dad's stories. They all came flowing. And I wasn't finishing poems, but just putting down notes, and just everything was coming to me. And that's when it started. And I sent a poem into a competition. First poem, one of the first poems, and I won that. And then I sent the poem to one of the teachers I had who taught me for dyslexia. He used to give me grinds, and we met. He's a Donegal guy. We met up years later, as it turns out, in Africa. So I was volunteering
Africa.
I was volunteering. I've been to Africa probably eight or nine times, building, working in an orphanage and a school and a hospital. And we were there. There's a load of us Irish guys, and he's over there teaching. But we're at the table, and it was his accents. I said to him, sorry, Michael McGlynn is his name. I said, Michael, did you used to give English grinds? And he just stopped. He just put his knife and fork down. And he said, Ger, I thought that was you, he said, but I wasn't sure. He said, for what it's worth, he said, you're the smartest kid I ever taught. And I'm glad you're doing well for yourself. And this was like, as regards I got into the fire brigade. I wasn't writing poetry at this time, but that's when we met up again. Because when I remember him, he had a big mop of black hair. Now he was bald and he had glasses. You're talking like 25 years later. And to meet up in Africa. So when I started writing poetry, we always kept in touch. I sent him a couple of my poems, and he was like, "Look, this is beautiful stuff." And he said, "I'm probably biased, so I'm going to send it on to, other people." And I just got really good feedback. And he said, "Yeah, you got to keep this up." So then I took it from there, and then from there I wanted to perform it, to recite a poem, to stand on the stage and do it. And there was a competition in Fingal, County Dublin, and I did one of the heats, and I won. And then I got into the final, and I won that. And then from there, I got asked to write a poem for the Fire Brigade. It just kind of stepping stones, little ripples, if you like, traveling outwards.
One thing just led into the other, into the next.
Just very organically. Never tried to push it. Never tried to twist words or become an abstract writer. Just wrote stuff from the heart. And look, I don't know. It seems to be, I guess, it's working for me.
What was the first poem? What was the first poem you used in your first successful competition that you were in?
It was a poem called I did a poem called The Quarryman. So the poem, the competition was out in Fingal, and I'd written a poem, a true story about St. Ida's Hospital, which was a mental institution, a madhouse, as they say, where people were sent. And my friend was doing the restoration, involved in the restoration of it. And I wanted to go out and see the architecture of it. I'm interested in that. And he showed me around, and he told me a story about it, a heartbreaking story. And I was like, that's incredible. He goes, will you write me a poem about it to keep it? And I said, okay. So I wrote that poem, and I wanted to perform that poem it's called Ita. I wanted to perform that poem in the competition, but you only have 3 minutes. And they said, no, I said, my poem with the introduction is about 3 minutes 15. Is that okay? And they were like, no. And I was like, what? And I said, I don't care about winning. I've never done this before. I'd like to stand on stage. But they were like adamant, you can't. I said, look, disqualify me. I just want to recite this poem because it's local to the area. And they were like, no. I was like, okay. I had another poem called The Quarryman, which is about the quarries up here in Ballyknocken. And very famous place where the Irish were treated like dirt, to be quite honest, under the British rule. They were basically slaves, but they had so much pride in their work because they worked in quarries before the British came along, and they're still working there now when they're gone. So they had this pride in their work. But I went up there. When you're a fireman, you hear and see different things. People tend, I find, to tell you a story that they wouldn't tell others. I got up there for a walk with my dog. I wanted to see the quarries. And I meet the owner, a guy called John McAvoy, chatting away. And he's a nice dog. I said, thanks very much. Nice quarry. as I'm chatting to, like, there's like deer looking at us. There's peregrine falcons circling overhead. It's an amazing place. He said, "Tell him I'm in the fire brigade," and he said, "Oh, you must see a lot of bad things." And I said, "Yeah, good days, bad days." And he said, "You must go to a lot of suicides." I said, "Yeah, unfortunately, we do." And he said, "My own brother hung himself. He was my twin, and he hung himself." And I was like, "Okay, yeah." But he opened up to me, and I got the impression that he'd never really spoken about it. He wanted to vent, and so I let him talk. But I walked away from that place just going, "Man, this guy is so stoic. What a great guy. Just getting on with life, working hard in an amazing setting." So when I started writing poetry, I remember this story. I remember John McAvoy telling me this story. So I said, I'm going to, remember I was saying earlier about if you can get a chance to tell someone how great they are.
Yeah.
So this is my chance to pat him on the back and tell him he's an inspiration. So I wrote a poem called The Quarryman. And I performed that on the stage because I didn't want to perform it, but the other one would have been overtime. So I went with this Quarryman. And when I was on the phone to the woman, she said, "Oh, and by the way, Jed, we're looking for more of a performance than a recital." And I was like, "All right, so I'm thinking, how do I perform this? How do I perform this?" So, like your good self there, I put on a paddy cap. I put on a white shirt, put some dirt onto it. Then I got a lump hammer and I got a chisel. I said, right, now I look like I work in a quarry. And then I'm trying to learn the poem off, and I only have 2 days to learn the poem. And I'm kind of tapping my foot to the rhythm. And then I'm thinking, oh, instead of tapping my foot, can't I hit the chisel with the hammer? So I don't know if you've seen, I actually haven't shared the poem, but so I'm giving the poem. I get up on stage, right? I arrive there. The guy before me was talking about being a cherry blossom petal pirouetting towards the ground, okay? And I was like, okay. And you can, fair enough, but I'm like putting on my paddy cap, putting on the shirt, and people are looking, what's this guy? And down the back. Then I take out a big rock out of a bag, a hammer and a chisel. And I get introduced and I walk up onto the stage. The microphone is up to here, so I had to just adjust that. And so I start giving the poem. But when I'm giving the poem, I'm in that quarry. I'm talking to John McAvoy. I don't give a fiddlers about the crowd. I'm not performing for them. I don't care about this competition. I'm performing to John McAvoy, even though he's not there. I'm thinking of his brother. And I gave it socks, and I get just to the bit, and I start beating, nearly like a Bowron beat, nearly hitting the hammer. I remember thinking, if I hit my hand, it's going to hurt. And I'm like, to hell with it. I'll just keep hitting it. I don't care. Wow. And but they had to so they announced the winner. They had to give it to me because it was undeniably the best poem of the night. And fellas were coming up to me, especially the older guys were like, I think they were dragged to this poetry recital by their wives and stuff. And they were coming up to me, that's so powerful. I've never heard poetry like that before. This is like, fair play to you. And what do you do yourself? And I'm like, I'm a fireman. I never do. How long are you doing this? And that's my first time. They were like, this is incredible. Like the fact that you're a fireman, you're kind of getting an instant bit of kudos, if you like, a bit of respect. And then, so I qualified for the final. And for the final, then I'm thinking, all right, this poem is powerful. This is great. But for the final, then they have this thing where you have to do 2 poems. In the final, they have like a semi-final and then a final. And I'm like, oh God, like, because I'm thinking they must think I'm a one-hit wonder. I only have 1 poem. So for the heat, I was like, okay, I'll do my poem about my dyslexia, self-belief, which another poem I haven't shared. It's my mom's favorite poem, but that's written from in here, like, because when I tell that poem, I'm I don't sound arrogant, but I'm a big, strong guy now. But when I'm telling that poem, I'm a scared 15-year-old kid again. And geez, I get upset thinking about it. So I did that poem as my first poem, and it got me through. And then in the final, the shirt came on, the white shirt. One of the local stonemasons gave me his hat and waistcoat for luck. You know, so like I'm representing Ballynockin now. I'm representing these guys. These are so proud of me that I'm, you know, that I'm putting their place on the map. And like Ballynockin granite was used extensively around Ireland, but extensively in Dublin City, where it became known as the skeleton of Dublin. Like the GPO was made of Ballynockin granite. So you're kind of educating people, like, and I feel like I'm representing them. I'm representing John McAvoy. I'm representing them all. So I won that, and next thing I got on to national radio, and because I'm a fireman, you're like Firefighter wins Fingal poetry competition, kind of nearly kind of headliney type stuff, because it's such an unusual, you know, you don't associate firefighters with writing poetry. One of the guys in work had asked me to write a poem about the fire brigade. And I was like, okay. So then when I wrote the Firefighters Call, there's one of the senior men in our job, a guy Paul Hand, had passed away, and Paul was in the Stardust fire and everything, and he told me about it. And again, I felt he was venting. I never worked directly with Paul, but he always had great time for everyone. He'd never pass you by, didn't care how long you were in or anything, just a real good guy. And I couldn't get to his funeral because of the way shifts are. Someone's got to work, you know, someone's got to do Christmas Day, if you like. So I was working this day and I couldn't get off for the funeral. And I remember kneeling in my kitchen, saying a little prayer for him at 11 o'clock that day. But so when I was asked to write this poem, I said, I imagine Paul was standing beside me to make him proud. Sorry, get a bit upset. But so I wrote the Firefighters Call, and from the heart, for the likes of Paul, because I genuinely believe this, that firefighters of Paul Hand's ilk, they don't leave the fire ground. Like the souls of great sailors haunt the waves. I think the same it can be said for firefighters, that they're there looking out for us. And so when I was on the radio, they said, "Oh, I heard you wrote a poem about the fire brigade and it won a competition." I said, "No," but they didn't want to hear the Quarryman poem or the self-belief poem. They just wanted to hear the fire brigade poem. Would you recite the fire brigade poem? And I did. And next thing, kind of people wanted to buy the poem, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to make money from this. It just feels so wrong. So, but people wanted to buy it. So we have a charity in work, Oscar's Kids, and it's kids with terminal cancer. It's a beautiful charity set up by parents of a kid called Oscar. And the kid passed away, and they set up this charity to help other parents going through the same thing. And they get indoctrinated into the fire brigade, into Dublin Fire Brigade. They get their wee uniforms, they get their badge number, they go to the station, the lads make a big deal of them. It's absolutely beautiful. And it could be something as simple as the money goes to raise a little laptop, or a trip to Disneyland, or whoever their favourite football team is, they get to see them. And it's just a wonderful thing. But yeah, we raised thousands. The poem raised thousands, and there was a whiskey company. I'll probably go. Sorry if I'm going off on tangents here, but basically, a whiskey company wanted to put my poetry onto their bottles. We've a whiskey club in work called the 1875 Whiskey Club, after the great Dublin whiskey fire of 1875. So we're in there in the Palace Bar. That's where we have our nights. And at the end of the night, the lads were like, "Jerry, give us a poem." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did a poem. I think it was a poem called The Amber Dame, which is written in such a way that you think it's about a woman, but it's actually about whiskey. Anyway, the guy was there, a guy and a girl, the reps from the whiskey company were like, "What's this about? It's incredible. You've given me an idea." Long story short, they want to put my poetry onto whiskey bottles. I was there, grand. So the first one they did was the Quarryman edition. I don't know if you see that, they're 2 stacks whiskey, and it's but it has the Quarryman poem on it. It has an image of John McAvoy on the bottle, and then it comes with the poem on the back, and that's Dave McAvoy. Like, what a photograph! Like,
and this is in every one of their bottles that they.
Yeah, so it's there. You can see this one is
Oh, it's a little
has been
used.
opened, you know. But it's good. It has my little logo there, the image of
I'll have to
David.
get a bottle of that next time I'm over.
Yeah, well, it's sold out, but definitely give you
okay.
a taste of it. But again, the sales from that, I donated to Oscar's kids. All went to the charity, which was great. But the next one they're doing is they want to do the firefighters call.
We have the 25th anniversary of
Yeah.
9/11 this September. I have the firefighters call right in front of me here. Would you want to recite that one for us?
Yeah, I'll recite whenever you want. Yeah, I can. No problem. So yeah, this is called the firefighters call, and just a little thing on this, Tim. When I was asked to write this, as I said, it was just after Paul had passed, and I wrote down every single word you would associate with the fire brigade, as in flames, trucks, bravery, cats and trees, you name it. And I said, I'm not going to use any of these words. I'm just going to write about what called us to the job, what's expected of us when we're in, and probably most importantly, what I feel happens when we're gone. So this is called the firefighter's call. It's not for fame or fortune that most deem necessary. No, I invest to don a crest for work less ordinary. Nor be it want of medals, cap or polished shoes, but a calling to help others who have everything to lose. To face hell's dancing angels and suppress them with each stride. To search resolve from deep within as loved ones weep outside. To stand with pride and dignity when comrades remember, be it pipes' lament that fill sad air or silence in September. And may those names that have been etched in brass or granite stone haunt me in the darkness so I never fight alone. And if a colleague's head hangs low from tasting tragedy, let me offer up my shoulder for them to lean on me. But when, alas, amazing grace is played for none but me, lower the flag, but raise a glass, for I'm not far from thee. I'm gathered with the old flames, looking down from God's great height, on call if aid be needed, to join you in the fight.
Absolutely unbelievable. I love it, Jar. Silence in September.
Yeah.
That rings with me for sure.
I didn't want to mention any there's no mention of any
that.
There's no mention of Dublin Fire Brigade or New York or anywhere, but I think you have to pay. There has to be a hats off to 9/11 because it's the benchmark of bravery, really. So that line, I wanted to get some mention it in some way. And I think
you couldn't have done it any better. It's absolutely perfect.
Well, I wanted the contrast between a pipe's lament that fills that air. So the air's, on one occasion, the air's full of noise, the noise of the bagpipes, and then the opposite of that is the silence. From noise is silence. So
your words definitely. They definitely. You pick the right exact word for every sentence. It's like it's so thought out.
I think that poem could only be written by a firefighter, you know. That's
agreed. Which there aren't really. I would say there's not many firemen poets, so that's what makes it even more special, I think. Let me ask you, who was your inspiration in writing poetry? Like, have you ever thought about writing music, like writing songs? Is there like Luke Kelly or Shane McGowan or?
Yeah. So, they'd be my biggest influence other than poets. Like, I'm kind of like who's your favorite poet? I don't really have a favorite poet per se. I like a poem here. I like a poem. I like Yeats. I like Robert Frost. I like I like Patrick. I like Raglan Road, but there'd be another poem I wouldn't like. But music, I was always big into music. My family are big into music. My mother's an opera singer, and we grew up. We grew up around opera of all things. Every Sunday was opera day in the house, and we could be hungover as a young kid, whatever. And Mom would be like, "Get out of bed! You have to play a match!" And blah blah. As I said, my brother's a songwriter, professional songwriter. My older brother Pat, and I'm big into lyrics. So I love Shane MacGowan. I love Liam Clancy. I love Luke Kelly. They're my influences because for me, they're poets. Like, how can you dare say that Shane MacGowan's not a poet? See, everything, the world is so, I have to be careful what I say here. I end up getting cancelled, Tim, but this kind of thing where everything's a poem, I don't run with that, because it's lowering the bar, I think. Like, you could go into a restaurant and read the menu and call it a poem. Like, where's the law? Here's my poem. It's called The Menu. Like, so soup of the day with fresh brown bread. Like, it's banana stuff. So, but these guys, these Shane MacGowan, Christy Moores, they're undeniably brilliant at what they do.
There's a YouTube video with Shane MacGowan and Christy Moore. It's a short little video where they're singing "Pair of Brown Eyes" together. And Shane Christy is talking about Shane and how he says that Shane told him, he says, "I don't want to be a poet. I don't want to be an actor. I don't want to be a writer. I just want to be a singer." And then Christy says, "Well, of course he's a poet, and of course he's an actor, and of course he's a comedian, and of course he's all those things."
Yeah.
But Shane just said, "I just want to be a singer." But as I had read somewhere, I love the song "Pair of Brown Eyes."
Beautiful.
And I've seen it written somewhere where somebody said that it's the greatest song ever written.
Yeah.
A pair of brown eyes. It is a great song,
I've seen Shane MacGowan a few. I got to see him a few times. I remember he's playing in the Olympia one time, and he'd have a cigarette. He was drunk as hell, and when the cigarette would fall to the floor, the roadie, like a roadie comes out with a guitar or something, the roadie would come out, put a cigarette into his own mouth, light it, en route to Shane, and by the time he got to Shane, take a drag out of it and put it into Shane's hand. Amazing.
But I love all those, everybody you mentioned, Luke Kelly, Christy Moore, Shane.
I remember being away from home, being actually in Boston, and really kind of discovering Shane MacGowan. Like, I would have heard him. We at parties, we'd always play him. One of my pals was big into him. The Broad Majestic Shannon is probably my favourite Poe song that he wrote for Liam Clancy. And he wrote that on like a cigarette box type thing, and Liam couldn't make out the words, and he wrote it down again. And we sat for a while near a gap in the wall, found a rusty tin can and an old hurling ball. It's just amazing,
Yeah.
And I was beside him at an airport once, and I could have said hello to him. And it was probably like I said, my dad with Jesse Owens that time. I kind of regret not just shaking his hand, but I didn't want to bother the guy. It looked like he was having a gin of some sort. Clear alcohol in a glass. I just let him off.
The bar I was telling you about before that was right around the corner from Gaelic Park was Characters, and I told you I saw the Wolf Tones there.
Yeah.
And Tommy Byrne was sitting at the bar after, I don't know if it was in between sets or it was after, but it was one of those settings where you could, once they're done playing, like you could sit there and have a beer and talk to them. It was that kind of a setting. And I remember sitting at the bar, and I asked him who he thought was the greatest Irish singer of all time. And I said that I thought Luke Kelly was the greatest Irish singer of all time. And he agreed with me. He said,
yeah.
And he also told me that he had met him, like, that he had hung out with Luke. Yeah. So it was a good conversation. It's something I remember. I'd be
Yeah,
curious if he remembered that conversation, because
it's great.
I
I
guess
think you
everybody
told
goes
that in
up
one of
to.
your podcasts, didn't you? You told that in one of your
I
stories.
did. I think I did. I
Yeah.
think I did mention that.
Yeah. I never, but like I said, he went to my school, so that gives you that little bit of hometown pride, I guess.
So I've read, most of your poems that you sent me, and I do have to say that one of my favorites for sure, and you mentioned it, that it's your mom's favorite, is The Poet.
Yeah.
I've read it. I've read it 10 times, and you mentioned that you've had fought with this dyslexia, so I understand where the poem, is rooted and where it's coming from. But it really can be applied to people, somebody that felt they were being bullied, or another thought I had was it could be applied to England, 800 years of oppression. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
that's what I read between the lines. It could be, it's very subjective a lot of times, poetry, but that's the beauty behind it, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. A good poem is it's open to it's open to your own interpretation. And I mean songs as well. Sometimes I love rock music as well, and I'm listening to a tune and I think it's about a certain thing, and then my wife Steph, who she'd be like, "That's not about that at all. That's such and such," and I'm like, "Oh, you're killing the romance." I thought that was about like something. So you can read a poem, and now I know why I wrote that poem, but certain words I'll put in there for a reason. It could be for very personal reasons, but if that poem helps someone, and actually that poem, The Poet, I'm glad you picked that out. Actually, again, I've never shared that poem. Yeah, my mom loves it.
Would you share it with us right now? Could you recite it?
Okay. So this is called The Poet. You numbered me with sheep to follow weaker men. What wolf ripped off his clothing, blood flowed within my pen. You sank me to the ocean floor where talent cannot burn. But I'm the one who rises. You are just my churn. You tied my feet with boundaries. You dimmed my sight with fear. You screamed at me with insult to the point I could not hear. You caged my aspirations. You filled my thoughts with doubt. But now the cage is open. The lark is flying out. When demon drove a spear in me, a quest to kill my pride, I grabbed it by the blade and pulled it through the other side. I carry that spear with me into every single fight. The blood pours from the spearhead into everything I write. Sinead.
Powerful, powerful.
Thanks, brother.
There's a line in there where you say, "I'm the one who rises. You are just my churn." And I think, this is what my interpretation is, that, at this point, you're like at the bottom of the sea, and that's where the churn, that's where the agitation is. But the agitation in the water is what creates the foam at top, right? So that was my interpretation. Am I interpreting that right?
I see. I guess there's no
The cream rises to the top, right?
Exactly. That's the whole point. It is. So, the expression, "You've talent to burn." He's got talent to burn. I don't know if you use that expression in America, but over here, like that kid's got talent to burn.
Yeah.
But something won't burn if it's underwater. And then the cream always rises, and cream, like you said, and cream is kept in a churn. So if the cream has to get out of the churn to rise, you sank me to the ocean floor where talent cannot burn. You put me right down there where the only place I cannot shine is right down there. But I'm the one who rises. I'm the cream. You're just my churn. You're just holding me. That's you're nothing to me. I'm coming out. I'm coming up. It's breaking out of the shackles. It's kind of that whole poem, I guess, really comes down to self-confidence. Really, self-belief. I was actually going to call the poem Self-Belief. Like you said, it could be anything that holds you back. So
and your past experience with dyslexia is really what drove this particular poem, correct?
for me, that's what this poem is about. I feel like I was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I was just waiting for the right time. That's to the opening line. Blood flowed within the pen. My blood flowed within my pen. So like sheep are kept in a pen, but I'm talking about the pen that writes. So words like that. And also I used the word, you caged my aspirations. You filled my thoughts with doubt. People that just keep knocking you till you start actually doubting yourself. But now the cage is open. The lark is flying out. And I could have used that. I could have said the bird is flying out, the swallow is flying out, the whatever, the cockatoo is flying out. It doesn't really matter. But I use the lark in particular because the lark is a beautiful singing voice. It's known for this. But if you put a lark in a cage, it will never sing again and it will die out of loneliness. And it was for this reason that the lark became known as the bird of freedom. Like Bobby Sands wrote about the lark a lot.
Yes.
It's a bird that cannot be held in captivity, and it has a voice that should be heard. So in a romantic way, it became the bird of freedom for Ireland. So that was why I used the lark in particular. And like you said, it could be relating to England. That line, it definitely is relating to England, the oppression.
Well, yeah, right. You said Bobby Sands. He made the lark out to be like the spirit of freedom and resistance, I think, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's what it is, because it shouldn't be held in captivity. No bird should, but especially one with such a beautiful voice. And it's I grew up luckily watching Van Damme films and watching Rocky, and they were great. It was about overcoming obstacles, overcoming, the kid that gets beaten up in school and comes back and beats up the bully one day. He trains, and you can apply that to life, and so the end of this poem is like when demon drove a spear in me. The demon for me is dyslexia. Drove a spear in me, a quest to kill my pride. Remember the Indians would grab the arrow and pull it through. Like, instead of like, you're not going to kill me. I got this. This making me stronger. And the blood pours from the spearhead into everything I write. I don't just sit down and write a poem. You got to give it more respect. I write it. I put everything into it. I research it if I have to. If I'm writing, I don't know, if I'm writing about anything, any topic, I research. I want to get the phrases right. I want to do it justice to the person I'm writing about. It has to mean.
Jared, I think you're nailing it, though. I mean, you really are. I've read a bunch of them. I wish we could go through all of them. That one, the Hurley Maker, there was a video that I saw. Was that a commercial, or what was that?
Yeah. So the Hurley Maker, there's a guy in work, a guy called Brian Hughes, and I always knew he was into trad music. Brian's quite a modest guy. He retired there a couple of years ago. And he said to me, do you ever think about putting one of your poems to music? And I said, I hadn't really. But he said, okay, send me one of your poems that you think would be suitable. So he's into his GAA, into his Gaelic football and hurling. So I had a poem called The Hurley Maker that I'd written. And when I was a kid, my dad used to fix my hurls, and he taught me how to fix hurls. I never made a hurl from scratch, but I used to fix them, and I used to fix them for other players as well in my club. And I used to go and get my hurls. I'd go to a Hurley Maker, and you're in this workshop. Imagine McSorley's with just one person in there making hurls, just memorabilia everywhere. That's what you're in. You're in.
That's a great picture to paint. Yeah.
Yeah. So sawdust all over the floor, all over the Hurley Maker's eyes. Half the time he doesn't hear you because there's so much sawdust on the floor. And you go in, and they're always dead friendly. And sometimes it'd be a younger guy. And the reason it's a younger guy is because his father's got too old. There's maybe arthritis in the hands, or the eyesight's gone, or whatever. So now the younger son is carrying on the tradition. So like, you're going back years. Like, hurling's been around for thousands and thousands of years. So it's just a massive part of our culture. And for me, it's up there with harp making or currach making. It's a beautiful thing. So when I wrote about the Hurley maker, I wrote that poem. I'm thinking about my dad, who's 90 now, you know, that way, who taught me, who's a brilliant pair of hands, but he never had the money for good tools and stuff. He tells a great story about remembering being going by a bicycle shop, going by a window and looking up. He said he was saving up to buy a saddle. He never had a bike, but he wanted to saving up to buy a saddle. Imagine, you know, how lucky I am that I've all these things that dad, because of dad's hard work. So I wrote this poem anyway. I showed it to Brian. Brian loved it. He got it, you know. He says, "Oh, this is lovely. I'm going to write music for him." So he wrote some music. We went to a recording studio in Wicklow. My first time being in a recording studio. Brian put down, what's the expression, laid down the pipes that they hear him playing the uilleann pipes. Like I said, I knew he was into trad music, but he's a world champion uilleann piper, this guy. He's so modest, right? He's CDs out and everything. Like, ask the lads in the pipe band about Brian Hughes. They all know him. They hold him in great respect. So next week we had this, I can't believe how well I sound, not in an whatever way, the pipes bring out the voice brings out the pipe, everything just complements each other. So then we said, let's try and make a video. And my brother-in-law had said to me, you'd owed me a couple of favours. And he said, look, maybe I can make a video for one of your poems sometime. So I said, Simon, is this offer still up for grabs? And he said, yeah. So he's like Gaelic Productions, Kilig. That's his business. That's what he does full time. So he said, we need a location. I said, can we shoot it in my garage? And he goes, yeah. And he told me what I needed to do. It took 6 months to get my garage ready. I have a lot of old carpentry tools. I collect the old planes. Another guy in work, another great fireman, Dave Horan. He, if someone is retiring, if they're getting a presentation or that, Dave will make the presentation or he polish up the axe. Brilliant pair of hands. He polished up all my old tools and we set the scene. But now I needed someone to play the part of a Hurley maker. I didn't want to do it. I don't think I just didn't want to do it. So I thought about getting an actor, but I couldn't afford to pay one. So my local barman, Alfie, he's a great guy and he's a big pair of hands. He's a stonemason by trade. Everyone around here is a farmer or a stonemason. And he said he'd do it. And we shot the video and it's just lovely warm tones. It's on my Instagram thing if you have a look.
And back with the play, it's Theo English to Mackie McKenna for Tipperary, and Mackie working his way past Pat Dillon, the full-back. Mackie McKenna still going through, takes a shot, and it's a goal! PJ Qualter gets it into his hand, across the framework in front of the goal, Francis Johnson.
Never pull a hurl from a bag or choose one off a shelf. For a true appreciation, you must meet the man himself. For skill that is obtained through lifelong dedication, weathered hands pass knowledge down to younger generation. Ash perfume fills your lungs as you push the workshop door. The maker doesn't hear you as you thread the sawdust floor. Hurling grates adorn the walls like spectators in the stand. There's dusty memorabilia, and sure there's hammers to beat the band. Raised imperfections evicted by the plane. Chippings fall like wooden feathers as blade follows the grain. Limber timber springs to life as shavings start to curl. Creation solos through the veins of hands that make the hurl. Old spoke shave rounds the edges, the balance checked by hand. excellence gets rewarded, the stamp of Maker's brand. For it's more than just an ancient craft, it's fond memories that we savour. So next time you seek perfection, go and meet the Hurley Maker.
But long story short, the poem made its way into Croke Park, like which is our national stadium, and it was played on the big screen. There's like a 50-foot screen, it's up there, the poem, and then the footage I used, and there's old photographs and that. They're all my dad's Clontarf's first ever teams and Dublin teams. There's a photograph there, an original photograph of the great Christie Ring from Cork. But the last photograph is an old black and white photograph of my dad's team in Croke Park, and it's from 1957, and he's wearing the paddy cap. He said he never wore it plain, but he wore it for the photograph because a few of them have it on because it was so cold that day. And it's the old Croke Park and the history of Croke Park. I mean, the Brits, the Black and Tans, shot people dead in Croke Park. So I'm there with Steph in the stand. My poem has been played on the big screen in Croke Park. Like, what an honour. And then I'm interviewed on the pitch by Daithí O'Shea, who'd be one of our kind of TV celebs. Great guy, lovely guy. And he's waiting with a microphone to interview me just as the poem was coming to a close. And as it's coming to a close, I turned to him and I said, geez, I'm doing all right for a chancer. And he just says, tell me about it. You know, so we did it off, you know. And then, but then I got an email there to say that the GA Museum, they're doing up the GA Museum, and they're doing a big archway, an artificial archway of an ash tree, which hurls are made of, and there'll be hurls coming out of it, and they want to incorporate the poem into the archway. And I said, amazing, yeah, that'd be fantastic, yeah. So it's going into the Croke Park Museum now, the poem, which is incredible, really, you know. So,
Gerard, that's great. That's great.
I've had a few little walks in the sun with the poetry, a few great moments, and I think to have the poem of Croke Park, that's definitely going to be right up there, you know. So that was a lovely.
Well, I hope you keep going with the poetry, and I hope please keep sending me anything new that comes out, because I mean, I think it's great. I really do.
Yeah,
I love it. You've inspired me to want to read more. You know, and what more can you ask? You know what I mean?
That's great.
As I get older, I feel like you're always you're getting exposed to different things that you never were exposed to before, and you know, it's nice to be able to appreciate. You know, you were sort of a catalyst, I guess, for me to appreciate your poetry. So now it does open my eyes to maybe look into more, you know?
Yeah. But it's about,
unless you just want me to read yours and that's it.
yeah, that's it. But like, look what you're doing with your podcast. You know what I mean? Like, why didn't you do this 20 years ago? You probably weren't in the right headspace, or even 10 years. Like, you found it now.
I could say that all day long.
Yeah. And that's how I feel about the poetry. And it's amazing, really. It's very hard to explain. As I said, I played Gaelic football and hurling all my life. And I don't know if this is a substitute for it or whatever, but I'm very passionate about it. And the years I didn't write, well, they're gone. It doesn't matter, but I still have those memories. I still have the stories, and it's a matter of just trying to get them onto a page. And I've loads of poems written. I've almost 70 poems written that I'm really happy with.
Wow.
I've shared very few, maybe 10. And every one has kind of gone on to, it's hit someone in a certain way, which is lovely. Like, I love it. And I remember you were talking one of your podcasts about, like, when the Americans come over and you maybe put on the, top of the morning accent and this type of thing. But the St. Patrick's Day that just went there, that was the best St. Patrick. I try and get to all of them since I joined. I'm 20 years in now in the job. That was the best St. Patrick's Day because the Yanks, if you like, were there. It was you guys brought so much pride, happiness. I know you're on your holidays and everything, but it was just the atmosphere of it. Like, so don't forever for 1 minute think like you're imposing. We love you guys and we love the fact, Tim, what you're doing and Eddie Bowles and all these guys. You know, you're keeping that Irish culture alive. You know, you're keeping it. The expression "blowing on the embers of an almost dead thing," like you can get it back, and it's happening in Ireland because I think there's so many. I suppose Dublin, Ireland is becoming very European, and all these different cultures coming in, and fair enough. But the centerpiece has to be the Waterford Crystal on Irish linen. Do you know what I mean? We have to keep this is Ireland.
Your culture.
It's our culture. We've a great culture. We've always been on the right side of history. I know a lot of Americans identify themselves as Irish for a bloody good reason. You know, I've been on holidays to Australia, Germany, these places, and I've been homesick, and I've only been away from home for 2 or 3 weeks. People left these shores and never saw them again. You know, it must be heartbreaking, and so I don't know what it's like. So when I hear about what you're doing with the Irish Snug, I think it's fantastic. I'm loving the podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing more of them. You know?
I appreciate that. Jerry. So listen, Jerry, it was so great having you on the podcast, and I'll tell you what I'd like to do in the future, you know, a little bit down the road, we'll do another podcast with maybe some of your newer poems, and I can't wait to get over to Dublin, and we'll share a pint together.
Absolutely.
And have some stories, maybe in a snug somewhere.
Absolutely. But thanks.
All right, Jerry. Well, you have a great day.